Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Monday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day and a great beginning to your week out there. Here to give you the latest information on many things this morning. There's so much to talk about all of a sudden, and I kind of knew this was always going to happen, and certainly it is. We have severe weather to talk about. We have the tropics to speak on. So I just want to say right off the dot, guys, take advantage of those timestamps. I'll have sections of this video broken up very well for you folks just to jump ahead if you need to. I know not everybody has the time to work through a 45-minute weather video, but the first thing we'll obviously discuss here is updated info on the tropics. We'll talk about what's going on out there right now with this area of interest that has increased in chances of developing here in the next 7 days. We'll speak on all the model guidance from overnight into this morning. We'll talk about the environment ahead of this storm that could promote this to eventually strengthen into a depression, maybe our next named storm. We'll talk about steering currents. We'll break it all down for you folks, so we'll nerd out with you a little bit. And then we will break down what's going to happen weather-wise across the entire lower 48 for today. I always do that in these morning videos. If you're a new viewer and not familiar with how I do things on this channel, there is a shot at widespread strong to severe storms from what we call a northwest flow event across a pretty large area of the country. So we need to speak on that. We'll zoom into individual areas. This is going to be a long one, guys. We have a lot to talk about. I don't want to leave anybody hanging in any individual area just because it's getting kind of active in the tropics. I don't want to be less informative across the entire lower 48. I want to keep the same energy on everything, if you will. You know, guys, I like to use the word energy a lot. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it. It gives others an opportunity to do so also. So let's get rocking and rolling. So this is the entire Atlantic basin out here. This is the Caribbean. This is the Gulf of Mexico, Southwest Atlantic. This is the U.S. And believe it or not, this is our area of interest right here. And I know it doesn't look overly impressive at all. I would agree with you if you think that. And it's really not. When this is pretty much expected. We weren't expecting this to develop into a depression or a named storm or even a hurricane in the shorter term. If you've been tuning in, we think it has an opportunity to develop later this week, really into this coming weekend, I would say. But this is the area we were watching. Just a little bit of energy popping off. You notice in these reds and these blacks, that indicates convection, colder cloud tops, which is telling us there's a little bit of thunderstorm activity, but there's no defined low-level circulation. There's nothing really defined about this at all right now. But we are expecting this, like I said, over the next several days to work into a better environmental background, if you will, into this region right into here. And what does this do after it gets right here? If it survives in the shorter term, does it kind of go like this? I mean, does it sneak into the Gulf of Mexico? Does it just kind of go right into Florida as just maybe just an area of tropical activity? So this is what we're watching. Now, my head's probably in the way. I do want to watch this activity over here too that continues to come off the west coast of Africa. It seems like every wave that does come off kind of encounters that dry Saharan dust and sort of gets just basically dried up quite literally. But we want to watch these tropical waves that come off the west coast of Africa because they are going to continue to work west, and there is a favorable MJO phase that's going to enter the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, eventually the entire Atlantic basin as we get deeper into August. And they're all going to kind of meet, and we're expecting tropical activity to really uptick, I think, substantially as we get into August. So that's what's going on right now. Let's get all these arrows and circles off your screen and keep on working forward here because there's a lot of tabs to work through. This did uptick from a 40 to a 50% chance to develop now, and we could get a bump up to a 60. I don't expect that to happen this morning, but watch me eat my words there. By the time I drop the video, the 8 a.m. update bumps it to a 50 to 60. As of now, it's just a 50% chance to develop. The X is where this wave is right now, which I just circled on a satellite. As it works into this area in orange, with the orange line slashing in between the circled area, this is where it has a 50% chance, a 50-50 shot to develop into a depression or a named storm. The next named storm is the D name, which is Debbie. Okay, so that's the latest from the experts at the National Hurricane Center. So All right, let's go on and go over model guidance. So the first thing we'll discuss, because this is so hard to see on the precipitation map and really on satellite, it's hard to really distinguish the tropical wave and really any other kind of convection out there in the ocean. We're going to look at energy in the low levels of the atmosphere, which kind of shows us where this tropical wave is. So you look at these slashes of yellow, that's energy in the atmosphere in the low levels, which is, I'm meaning like a mile above our heads. In this case, a mile above the fish's heads and the surface of the ocean out here. So we look at this when we're just trying to figure out where that energy is in the atmosphere. So your eyes need to go right here, and this is starting off tomorrow evening. All right. So this is our tropical wave, just a broad area of yellow, okay, and the 850 millibars, 6,000 feet up in the air. So this is it. I want you to kind of keep your eyes on this as we work our way later into this week. Getting to Wednesday morning, there it is, working its way north of kind of Puerto Rico, the Lesser Antilles. We get into Thursday morning, it's kind of north of Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and it looks like those yellows are starting to darken a bit into oranges now, which means that this energy is sort of getting stronger, consolidating a little bit more. And as we move into Friday evening, this is looking like the wind barbs are beginning to circulate around this area of energy. So this is telling us it's trying to get somewhat of a lower level circulation with it. Now, I think a recon mission is going to go out into this sometime in the next day or so, I think tomorrow, to actually see what's going on with this system, the hurricane hunters basically. So we'll actually get observations on what's going on with this wave. But anyways, we fully don't expect this to do anything until we get really into this weekend. I really think that's going to be the case. So we continue to move this forward. We get into Saturday morning, and then we get into Saturday afternoon. This is right over the Bahamas, and I know this looks kind of scary for you folks tuning in from the Bahamas or even Florida, but it's really not. I mean, there is more vibrant kind of yellows and even oranges and reds, but this is still a weaker system, but you can see it. It's pretty obvious where, whatever we are tracking out here, that's where it is. I mean, you can see it here in the orange and red. That is our tropical system. But as we continue to move forward, look how close. And if you've been tuning in, you know the Euro has been going out to sea, but it's a little bit closer to the southeast coastline now. We're going to explain why it's kind of trending a little bit further west here in a second when we talk about steering currents. But one of the reasons is it's a little bit weaker. So this is Sunday evening. A little under 7 days from now, we have a weak tropical depression right off the coast of the southeast and the Carolinas, and it actually makes a landfall as a depression, weak tropical storm into the Outer Banks next Monday evening, a week from today, basically, and then it heads on out. We have to watch after that. And I know my people up here in the Northeast are wondering, show us too, and I will kind of show you guys, but this is kind of too far out to really focus too much on this, but it does get pretty close to the Northeast coastline. So let's look at the precipitation map. And it's going to be hard to distinguish this from, any other blobs of green on your map, but this blob of green right here is our tropical wave, right? And we keep this going, and if you kind of get it in motion there, it almost looks like it is rotating cyclonically. But we start to get into Thursday morning. There it is. There's our blob of green, our tropical wave. And then this is when we start to get into a Friday evening. It pops off an L, which indicates, hey, it's saying that we got an all-out low pressure here. And we get into Saturday morning. It's 1,009 millibar low right over the Bahamas. Not very strong, bringing some gusty showers, nothing substantial at all, but it really slows down. The steering current's really bogged down. And then we get into Sunday evening. This gets down to 1,005 millibar low, maybe a weak tropical storm, tropical depression. Makes a landfall into the Outer Banks, and then it does strengthen, but it doesn't impact anybody after it kind of heads northeast. But I really just think we need to focus on the shorter to medium term for now. But that's the European. So let's go over what the latest GFS is showing. This is the latest GFS from this morning. So it literally just ran. And the GFS has been on more of just the less aggressive side. It's been certainly not as aggressive as the European has been. So typically it's the other way around. But the GFS, there's our energy right here. You can barely see it. GFS really keeps it weak in the shorter term. It rides this, and this is it right here. It rides this area of energy over kind of the greater Antilles, like the Caribbean islands, Cuba, Hispaniola, etc. And then it actually gets this energy not on the east, on the southeast side of the southeast coastline, the eastern side of the southeast coastline, gets into the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see these wind barbs trying to somewhat circulate now. And it looks like the GFS tries to consolidate this energy right before making landfall, but it never has an opportunity to. And if you look at a couple runs prior to this, you can tell, like, this was the run from yesterday evening. It does successfully kind of get a weak tropical system to get going next Wednesday morning and goes into the panhandle of Florida. But the latest run continues that weaker scenario that the GFS continues to really like. And this is the GFS precipitation. There it is. There's the blob of green right here. Notice it just doesn't look much different from this area of green up here, except this is more, I guess you would say, circular in general. But you continue to keep this going late into this week. Saturday morning, Sunday morning. I mean, this is it right here. You see the circle of the isobars. This is bringing some gusty showers and storms across Florida. Next Monday evening, a week from today, and then it makes landfall, whatever the heck it is, 10 days from now into the Gulf coastline. But guys, I do want to reiterate, and I will talk about the Canadian and the Icon model too. It's hard for me to believe that if anything, any energy can get that's still well intact and get in the Gulf of Mexico, that it just will not at least strengthen at a moderate pace. It's very hard for me to believe something like what the GFS is showing. And I'm not trying to wish or hope for the worst case scenario, like some people think that these weather people are. I'm just saying, I think most people would agree with that. We know the Gulf of Mexico is notorious for doing awful things with these tropical systems. But what about a Canadian model, which is pretty much stuck to its guns? It's kept this week. It's taken more of a GFS route. Tropical system right over Hispaniola, Cuba, and this is just the area of unsettled weather right here. You see more, I would say highlighted area of greens and yellows and orange right here over Cuba. And then we get into this coming Sunday morning, a little under 7 days from now, 6 days from now, and it pops off an L right here off the coast of Fort Myers and Tampa, and it does make a landfall as a weak tropical storm into the Big Bend of Florida, like next Monday morning, about a week from today, and then it rides this into Georgia, and it basically kind of takes the same route as Hurricane Idalia did last year. So that's the Canadian. Does show a scenario with a tropical system making landfall. Nothing too alarming though. But we'll take a look at the latest OOZ Icon model, which I think we should continue to show some love. It did great with Barrel, was showing that northern route before any models did. It was a little bit too far north, but it still did a good job showing it. And sure enough, as we get into Friday afternoon, this is taking the GFS and the Canadian route also, and bringing a lot of tropical moisture over the Cuba and Hispaniola earlier in the week. We get into Saturday afternoon, pops an L off, and kind of takes the same route as the Canadian model. You have a weak tropical storm next Sunday evening, making landfall a little bit further up the coastline, maybe more so into the Big Bend. I would say the northern Big Bend, the kind of the panhandle coastline of Florida, about a week from today. Same thing with the Canadian model as a 999 millibar low. And if you do look at the latest 06Z Icon, which is the latest one we have, it only goes 120 hours out. OOZ Icon goes 1 week out. 06Z, 18Z Icon goes 120 hours out. But even 120 hours out, it already is popping off a low here, kind of between the Bahamas and the northern coastline of Cuba. This is for this coming Friday night. So this looks like it's going to do the same thing as it did the run prior. So that's the operational model guidance. Confidence is there that, we're going to have some sort of, this is eventually going to try to get its act together, I would say, when it's its closest to land. Now we look at the European Ensemble, guys. Now remember, this makes up 51 members and puts them all on a screen for us. So we don't have 25, 30 tropical systems out here right beside each other. This just puts all the members onto one screen for us, if you will. So I'm going to try to make that as little as confusing as possible. But, the European Ensemble, most of its members, almost all of them, gets off the coast of the southeast. They don't like the idea. Massive disagreement. They don't like the idea of this getting into the Gulf of Mexico at all. Most of these members, which are a lot, by the way, over half of the members, develop this into some sort of decent tropical system, and I'd say decent, I'm meaning like a depression or higher, and go around this ridge, and then, you know, pretty much go out to sea. But some of these members do, like you got a 987 millibar low that works its way between Myrtle Beach and Wilmington, do make landfall, and some of them do sneak into the Gulf of Mexico. But a lot of these do form, but then kind of turn out to sea. Now, I think we should really just focus on the fact that there's so many members right now, not so much the steering current. Steering current situation could change. Now, let's go to the latest 06Z GEFS, which only goes 120 hours out, unfortunately, and we only have 2 members, so we're actually going to have to go back to the OOZ run so we can go out a little bit further, and we're going to go about a week out. And yeah, I mean, there's only 6 members out of 21, which there's only 21 members in the GFS ensemble. So a pretty weak signal continues for the GFS in its ensemble. So you got that, guys. So that's kind of the ensemble comparison there, which I think is always a great thing to look at over the operational runs with any kind of weather, not just the tropics. But if we're talking about the ingredients that could support strengthening, this is in Celsius, and these are sea surface temperatures. I think most are probably thinking, Mitch, I don't measure it in Celsius. Well, most people do in the world. Us in the U.S., we do not. Fahrenheit. But converting 29 to 30 degrees Celsius, which you see right in here, 31, 32, that's the mid to upper 80s. I mean, getting close to 32, you're getting close to 90 degrees. I mean, you got this pocket of very warm weather, warm sea surface, hot sea surface temperatures off the coast of Florida, right off the Gulf Stream. That's, I mean, into the low 30s in Celsius. I mean, that's getting close to over like 90 degrees. Okay, so whatever does develop is going to go like this, or either maybe like this. Okay, and try to do something, whether it's right into here or either anywhere into here. Okay, so what we know is that the waters right in here are deep into the 80s, not the low 80s, but the mid to upper 80s. Right here in the Gulf of Mexico, the eastern Gulf of Mexico, even warmer, getting close to 90 degrees in certain areas. So you check that off the box as, I guess you would say, an ingredient that supports a strengthening tropical system, and at minimum, a maintaining tropical system. Okay, and then we look at the upper wind pattern, and this is the part that might confuse some people. So these are winds at about 40,000 feet up in the air. The areas in blue indicates a little bit more higher winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Same area that I just mentioned, 40,000. Okay, so if you're in the blue area, you probably are dealing with a little bit of shear, depending on what direction the wind flow is going. So I'm going to get this in motion, and you're not going to really even see where the tropical system is, but you're going to see an L pop off right there. Okay, this is where the European, the EPS ensemble, is showing around late Friday night where the potential for a tropical system will be. Okay, and what I want to try to explain this. Low pressure in the northern hemisphere has a cyclonic flow to it, so it's turning like this. So whatever has developed at this point, right near the Bahamas in the Southwest Atlantic, if something like the European was correct, obviously in the low to mid levels is rotating like this. Does it have a defined low level circulation? I mean, it probably has some sort of elongated circulation, at least, I think, at this point. Okay, so the flow is going like this, but in the upper levels, winds are being dispersed out away from the system. You see these arrows embedded in these lines, these little streamlines. So you got kind of a flow, going the opposite direction of the actual low-level circulation. So we call that an anticyclonic flow, or a ULAC is a weather nerd acronym for it. It stands for upper level anticyclone. So basically you're getting winds being dispersed out away from the storm. Air rises, and then it gets dispersed outward because air is being pushed away in the upper levels of the atmosphere from the tropical system. So as air is getting pushed away, that allows for more air to kind of rise up, and then the cycle continues if these favorable upper wind conditions continue, which that allows for more air to rise. We know that rising air is a promoter for shower and storm activity. Sinking, stagnant air is the opposite. So that would promote consistent shower and storm development firing in a tropical system over very warm sea surface temperatures. So, if the energy survives between now and this weekend, I don't see how this doesn't at least moderately intensify right into here. Okay, so we get all this back off your screen. We keep on moving here. And we'll talk about kind of precipitation, right? Another thing people are wondering about is, what about the dry air? Well, this thing looks like it really cocoons itself with a nice, broad, moist environment right into here. Now, there is going to be dry air that's going to be affecting this storm for the life of it, because there's still a lot of dusty, dry air out there pretty much across anywhere in the Atlantic Ocean, just about, in the northern sections of the Atlantic, the North Atlantic. So, but it does look like it surrounds itself, kind of cocoons itself with a pretty nice, moist bubble. So, you got that. Now, we talk about steering currents, and this is the part where, it always gets kind of tricky to explain, but the warmer colors on your screen, the reds, that's high pressure. The bluer colors, that is low pressure. Anything in between is kind of, quite literally anything in between, kind of a stagnant flow, not much of one way or the other. Okay, so we're going to take this out to, let's just take this out to about Thursday evening, the evening of August 1st. Let's go back to make sure this is still working. It is. So I'm going to draw on this. So we got weak ridging right in here. You see these lighter shade of red or salmon color right in here, all that. That is very weak ridging. Kind of there's a flow out here, but it's very weak. So you see this blob of white right here. That is our tropical wave, our lower pressure. It's not even low enough to really pop off an area of blue right in here, but that is our tropical wave right here, kind of north of Hispaniola, like Thursday evening, right? Now, I want you to watch this feature and this feature right here. This is kind of an embedded upper low, kind of upper trough, basically an area upper energy, kind of embedded in this ridge right over the entire lower 48. This will try to break down this ridge. But the flow around this high pressure is going to go like this. Okay, so that is what's kind of carrying this tropical system, more so west than north or northwest in the shorter term. Okay, but this little area right here in white is going to kind of create an opening in the ridge, and then this area up here in the blue, it's a full-fledged upper trough, is going to create maybe even a bigger opening. Okay, so we get this back off your screen and we keep this moving, and notice how there it is. You see that area in white that kind of opens up this ridge somewhat, and all of a sudden you don't have as much of a ridge influence on this. So at this point, it's still very weak, but our tropical system on the European is right into here. Okay? Flow is still kind of very lightly going around this ridge influence. Okay? But it's kind of starting to, there's now a weakness right into here. One created by just a weakness in the ridge because of this upper trough sort of amplifying and digging down to this region. Then you got this bigger area of lower pressure digging down that's going to try to break open this ridge even more. So this low is going to feel this and try to move into that weakness where I drew the squiggly lines. Okay, we get this back off and we keep it going. And sure enough, it does. So now at this point, flow is kind of going like this very lightly. And that's why this thing really slows down right into here. Pretty much a wide open weakness right here. I will tell you the latest Euro has weakened the influence of this upper trough digging down from the last few runs that I've showed you over the last couple of days. And I think that is allowing the European scenario to be a little bit weaker and push a little bit further west. If you've been tuning in, the European has been mainly going like this. Now it's pushing a little bit closer to the Carolina coastline, southeast coastline, but it's weaker. It's weaker. It's not stronger, it's weaker. So you keep this going, and then the ridge basically builds over this system. Like, for example, like this is over a week out. That is our low right here embedded in all this ridging behind it, so around it. So it's really just embedded in ridging and just kind of, it's so weak, it's just kind of getting yanked around. And this trough never fully digs down and breaks down this ridge. So that's why you can't sit here and say that the GFS, the Canadian, the Icon is wrong, because the European steering current wise is actually ticking a little bit towards those scenarios. So we'll go over all that again tonight, and we'll see if there's any changes. I'm going to be interested. Last thing I'll talk about in the tropics is this. I know I don't talk about the Eastern Pacific much, but I think it's worth mentioning, and we'll do this. We'll talk kind of more on this tonight, more than likely, but it is getting very active in the Eastern Caribbean. Mexico right here, Texas, okay, that's the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean. This is the Eastern Pacific, the Pacific side, okay? I mean, we got this area of interest right here, that's most likely going to be a next named storm in the Eastern Pacific, and then we got one right behind it. Why is it getting very active out here? Well, we've been talking about a favorable MJO phase that supports rising air is now moving fully into the Eastern Pacific. That same rising air motion is going to move into the Atlantic. It's not really in place now. Really, the only thing driving this tropical wave right now that we just discussed is a Kelvin wave, which is basically a very discrete area of rising air that's kind of riding with it. But we do look at rising air, sinking air. Rising air is indicated by the green, sinking air more so by this kind of orangish red color. Okay, and this is between now and August 3rd, so basically a week in advance from right now. And rising air is entering the Eastern Caribbean. You see this area in green? That's a favorable rising air MJO phase. Now, we go from August 3rd to like August 10th. Okay, huge area of rising air fully engulfed into the Eastern Pacific. But look how it's, I mean, this is a huge area. Look how it's starting to get into the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and now basically oozing into areas of the Atlantic now. And then I really think mid-August could be quite active in the Atlantic basin. And it could still continue to be active in the Eastern, I keep wanting to call it Eastern Pacific, the Eastern Caribbean, the Eastern Pacific, where you have this huge area of rising air over this area. And then we could get a little bit of a quieter period, maybe at the end of August, with sinking air moving back in, and then we'll have to deal with it again as this moves in. So just want to kind of explain that to you guys. Like I said, I think that this is kind of the door opening to a very active period for the next few weeks at least. As far as the tropics. So let's talk about now what's going on across the country and what's going to happen throughout the day. So we're switching gears here. First thing I want to mention is there's a nasty line of storms making its way through I wouldn't say the entire state of Illinois, but it could eventually work its way through the entire state of Illinois before it's all said and done. But nasty area of storms waking you guys up abruptly across Illinois, Peoria. There's even a severe thunderstorm warning. We got to watch what this energy does downstream, as that could affect model guidance that I'm going to show you later in this video for this area. But you got little impulses of energy right here and northwestern Iowa, up here in Minnesota. Energy right in the upper portion of the ridge here in Kansas. We got energy across the southern Alps region. We got this spin over southern New England. You're waking up to a soggy Monday morning from this energy that tried to get its act together right at the last second. So good bit of stuff going on this morning as far as active weather. The immediate Rockies are pretty quiet, but we do have some much needed rain making its way into the Pacific Northwest coastline. But that's what's going on right now. You notice this energy is kind of going like this, right? Like this is kind of dipping down to the southeast from the northwest. Well, that is because we have a ridge over the south central U.S. and I want to show you water vapor loop because I think it looks very interesting this morning. It shows the picture very well. I'm going to go to pink here, and you see how the more cloudier colors, the gray colors, I would say the whiter colors, that indicates more moisture in the atmosphere. And you see how it's kind of going like this, and then it kind of dips down like this. A little bit of a ridge built into this area, and this is going to cause big time heating in these areas today. And then you got this gnarly looking spin right here that's over the southern New England area, bringing those showers and rain and even some storms this morning. But you got energy riding up here, and this is a classic northwest flow setup where energy rides the upper portion of this ridge. There's an increased mid-level jet streak right over this area, and this is going to drive a damaging wind threat and a tornado risk today along this boundary setting up, and we're going to have strong to severe storms where I just drew those arrows that eventually could get all the way into the Carolinas today. So this is kind of a storyline that's not being talked about as much because the tropics are heating up, but I think it's worth mentioning for sure. And you look at watches, warnings, and advisories, Heat advisories in the orange, excessive heat warnings in the purple, excessive heat watches in the burgundy, flood watches on top of these heat advisories. You already know that means you're going to have some very hot conditions. But ridge is building up in this area to a boundary, so a lot of heating in this area today, very high humidity, and we will talk about temperatures in this area also. Red flag warnings scattered about across the Rockies where it's very hot and been very hot and very dry. Not as hot anymore, but still very dry. We need the rain. Excessive rainfall outlook in the yellow, that is where we have at least a 15% risk of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance. So not only do we have a severe weather threat in this area, but a flash flooding threat also. And talking about the severe weather threat, I expect this outlook to change somewhat. I'm making this video as around 7:17 a.m. Eastern time. This could change. We could have a slight risk that's pushed a little bit further south, east, a little bit further north. But for now, slight risk here in the Dakotas, areas of Nebraska, and then down here in areas of the Ohio Valley, Midwest, areas of southern Indiana, southeast Illinois, oozing down to the heart of Kentucky. Marginal risk extends all the way down to Columbus, Columbia, Charlotte, all the way back up to the Dakotas. Little baby marginal risk here for Philadelphia, Baltimore, for areas of the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast also. But what is this driven off of? Tornado risk. I could see somebody getting bumped up to a 5% risk here. But for now, there's a 2% risk for Bismarck, Aberdeen, Pierre, down the Valentine. And there's a 2% risk of a tornado for Chicago, Peoria, Springfield, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville, Evansville, Bowling Green, Lexington, Kentucky. So, even all the way back to St. Louis, Hannibal, you guys, 2% risk of a tornado. The wind threats, 15% risk in the yellow areas of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. This area down here, and this area up here in the Dakotas and northern Nebraska. And then we have in the black outline region a 10% risk of winds exceeding 75 miles per hour or higher. Now, guys, I do think the yellow area down here in the Kentucky, Indiana, etc., and Illinois is going to expand somewhat. And I also think that they'll introduce a hatched risk for down here too, for a risk of more stronger winds, that's 75 miles per hour or higher. So we'll see what happens. I might be wrong. That's my guess with this. Hail threat, not as big, further to the east, but it is substantial here for the Dakotas, northern sections of Nebraska, when not only we have the 15% risk of hail, we also have a 10% risk of significant hail, 2-inch in diameter or larger. A lot of information, guys. So let's break down the southeast first. We're going to get numerous showers and storms, most likely for the southern Alps by about late morning, midday. Storms anywhere from, Huntsville, Alabama, the southern Cumberland Plateau, storms down here in northern Georgia, some scattered storms along the Georgia coastline, the Carolinas, storms rumbling over the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Virginia, eastern hills of Kentucky. One thing we watch for, though, with all these showers and storms across the southeast is a more put together line of storms right up here, surging out of southern Indiana and then moving into Kentucky. So in fact, I want to go on and zoom into that area right now. So a lot of this other energy that you're going to get, like I said, late morning, early afternoon, as you can tell, eastern Kentucky, western VA, even up here into West Virginia, the Carolinas, etc. All this is just kind of shower and storm activity. These could be severe too. They could kind of congeal together. What I'm the most concerned about, and I would say watch these storms too. Early afternoon in southern Indiana, because they are still packing a punch right now in Illinois. This energy right here in southern Indiana is for what's going on right now in Illinois. We'll have to see if this actually holds together a little bit more into Kentucky. The HRR model says this will dissipate, and then another additional area of storms will develop later this evening. This is like 11 p.m. Big storms making their way through southern Indiana, out of Illinois, into Kentucky, Frankfort, Lexington, pretty much everybody in Kentucky getting blasted into the late night hours with a nasty line of storms. How much does this hold together as it gets into northern Tennessee, eastern Tennessee tonight? It's a big question. A lot of times they hold together more than what models show, but I think it's worth mentioning that, hey, tonight in Kentucky, all the way into the wee hours in the morning in Tennessee, you could get hit by a pretty nasty line of storms. So be aware of that. If we look at the updraft velocity swath from these storms that kind of get going late tonight up here, it does indicate these more vibrant colors, some rotation with the storm. Doesn't mean that everybody that lives in this area, in these colored areas, is going to get a tornado. It just means that we're going to get some rotation with these storms at least. And sometimes the rotation means a latching to the surface, which means we got a tornado. So we just got to be aware of that. And then we look at the winds. The winds don't look too worrisome. I mean, you do have some 40, excuse me, losing my voice here, talking so fast and so much. We could get some winds approaching 40, 45, 50, 55 miles per hour in these areas. But I do think that's kind of what's holding them back from pulling a more substantial wind threat in this area. But I could see this changing, guys, as that there might be a lack of a little bit of flow out here, kind of to the surface is what I should say. Not really aloft, but to the surface. But all these could generate damaging winds. This line of storms making its way through. So rainfall between now and the next 24 hours. It really likes the idea, the blend of all models does, of kind of a more isolated area of heavier rainfall across the central Carolinas. But then it shows Kentucky, southern Indiana, into eastern Tennessee, western VA, which really needs the rain. Even West Virginia getting a good bit of rain, anywhere from 1/2 inch to 2 inches of rain today. So the Northeast today, we're going to continue to deal with some shower activity across New England. Some of this could get going with some daytime heating, maybe pop off a thunderstorm or two in Vermont, New Hampshire. We could get some strong to severe storms down here in like the mid-Atlantic. We'll have to see how widespread they are. The HRRR model says, that it doesn't really think that it's going to be that bad today, but it could. But we could get some shower and storm activity in Vermont, New Hampshire. And then we have to watch this activity in lower Michigan. And I do think it could get stormy as we're waking up tomorrow morning in southern Ontario with a system swinging through, embedded into the ridge right here in this area here. So we could wake up to some storms in southern Ontario tomorrow morning. So if we head on down to the south central U.S., weather-wise, it's pretty quiet. Some very isolated pop-up downpours down here in southeast Texas, southern Louisiana. See what's going on in southern tip of Texas. Not really much of anything. Weather-wise, it's pretty relaxed. Most of the flow is going around this area. What's unfortunate is the heat is returning. We do have this hotter area up here in Kansas, Oklahoma. I mean, the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas, well into over 100 degrees, 105, 110 degrees, low 100s across Oklahoma and Kansas, and the mid 90s in general across the Mississippi Valley region, especially west of it. It's the heat indices that are going to be brutal today. These are feels like temperatures in the hottest part of the day right here. We're going to get close to 110 in the Delta region, and just, very hot temperatures, guys, well over 100 as far as the heat indices in this area. So the heat has returned for now, unfortunately, and I do expect some of this heat to ooze into the southeast here in the next few days, unfortunately for me. But definitely sucks for you guys out here. Definitely have ways to stay cool for sure. But the north central U.S., I'm running out a little bit of gas, guys. We're going to make our way through this, though. It always stinks when severe weather and the tropics decide it wants to uptick at the same time. It did the same thing with Hurricane Beryl, and it's doing the same thing right now. So it only knows how to go crazy at one time. But we're going to kind of zoom into Indiana, Illinois here in a second, but we got to watch that energy. And then we got to watch for these storms in the UP of Michigan. I mean, all of Michigan. Some storms could fire in eastern Wisconsin. But definitely a stormy afternoon, evening potential for the UP of Michigan and lower Michigan. So definitely be aware of some storms that'll kind of fly through the area. And then we'll have to watch these storms in the Dakotas, as you can see. These could be supercellular in nature. And they could produce large hail, a tornado, and some damaging winds in the Dakotas today. And we're going to zoom into that area here in a second. But to zoom into kind of the Midwest Ohio Valley first, I really want to watch what these storms do downstream. I mean, they're popping off right now, and let me see if I can find it. They are pretty healthy right now. HRRR model actually doing pretty well with it. So pretty healthy as of right now. How much will this hold together downstream? It does show these eventually weakening as they get into Indiana. I don't know how true that's going to be. It's just kind of watching at this point. Indianapolis shows you guys getting hit by storms midday today. Down to Evansville, kind of the same thing. Some storms sweeping through southern Indiana. How much will they hold together by the time they get into Kentucky? We'll just have to watch. And then some storms start to refire in central areas of Indiana. Could get some more storms in Indianapolis. And these storms could extend a little bit further west in Illinois. Okay, so, I mean, they could extend as far back as St. Louis. But it really has some nasty storms around midnight tonight, really sweeping through southern Indiana, areas of Illinois, all the way into Kentucky, which we've kind of already mentioned. And then they continue to dip southward. And the NAM ain't much different than this, guys. I mean, we'll kind of switch it to the NAM just to, come on, work with me. We'll kind of switch it to the NAM just to kind of give you a different model output here. And it kind of shows the same thing. Extends those storms a little bit further west in Illinois. And then, yeah, I mean, kind of the same thing, guys. Not much different here. But we'll go back to the HRRR model, and we'll go to this. And we'll actually show you the significant tornado parameter. I do want to show you guys how it does spike right into here. So you got the significant tornado parameter reaching 4s, even some 5s. The higher the number, the better the ingredients in the atmosphere for tornadoes. Doesn't mean that you got a 5 out of 10 chance to see a tornado, 50-50 shot. It just means that, just look at the numbers. So those numbers do spike right into here. Ingredients do support it, and then the storms form and sweep southward and eat up all the ingredients. So you do look at the updraft velocity swath, and like I said, you know, in the southeast frame, it does show rotation with these storms, especially in southern Indiana. And then we're going to have a risk of damaging winds, which I'm kind of doing some of this on the fly, guys, to avoid pulling up about 1 million tabs. But we do run the risk of damaging winds in this corridor of Illinois, southern Indiana, into Kentucky. Maybe some 40 to as much as 60 mile per hour wind gusts are possible with these storms, guys. So be aware of that, and then we'll kind of look at how much rain could fall in this area. Corridor of heavy rain, a little weird glitch here, where 2 National Weather Services aren't in sync. Always hate that, it looks weird. A couple inches of rain between both areas of storms, and then we're going to watch southern Indiana. I know I keep mentioning that area. Certainly a couple inches of rainfall into Kentucky is likely this afternoon into this evening, into the overnight hours. And then these storms in South Dakota, even up in the North Dakota, but I think South Dakota will be the main show today. But even, I mean, these are some big looking supercells into the northern counties of Nebraska too. These could produce a tornado. They could produce some damaging winds and some nasty weather, very large hail. So I would say if you live anywhere from central North Dakota all the way to northern Nebraska, these storms will have an opportunity to sweep through later this afternoon to this evening, and you're going to have a damaging wind threat. And eventually into tomorrow, we could be dealing with a nasty area of storms moving through Ames, Des Moines, some storms up here into Minnesota also. And you do look at the updraft velocity swath. This looks more like supercells to me in South Dakota, areas of Nebraska. I really do think we're going to get some tornadoes in this area today. We'll see what happens though. Excuse me. And here's what the damaging winds is showing. No, not winter. I wish. This is what, yeah, it definitely looks more robust as far, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so damaging winds, look, I think that's why they have the risk of significant winds more so up here. You see these pockets of winds here. This is in 1 hour intervals here, but this is winds approaching, like in this area, 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. So these storms up here, if you get hit by one, you're going to run a risk of a tornado. Lower risk, but a risk, and then damaging winds and very large hail. So typical supercell type stuff up here, I think, today in the Dakotas and the north central U.S. So be aware of that. The western U.S., it's quiet. It's definitely gotten quiet out here. You know, we're going to get a little monsoon energy to get some shower activity in Arizona, Phoenix, potentially Tucson more so, and then New Mexico, very possible. And then we're going to get some showers in the Pacific Northwest that could ooze tonight into the Rockies, northern Idaho, eventually into maybe western Montana tomorrow morning. I don't expect this to add up to much, guys. All in all, pretty quiet day across the western U.S. Temperatures, pocket of much warmer air in the mid-Atlantic. I mean, 90s, getting close to 100 degrees in the mid-Atlantic. Cooler air because of these showers and storms. with this little spin up here in areas of the southern New England region. Just humid and cooler down here, but it's very humid because of this moist air mass across the southeast. You get south of the boundary of where this ridge is in place, very hot, soupy weather, 90s, low 100s, high humidity. And out west, it's really cooled down. I mean, it's downright chilly up here in western sections of Washington State, northwestern Oregon. Everybody else just not bad at all. Average to slightly below average temperatures. So, man, that's all I got, guys. That is a lot. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all. You have a wonderful, wonderful start to your week.